Hey boys and girls, welcome to the first ever virtual VBS for VBC. You're going to get your bags and they're all animal shaped, animal themed type stuff, and in them you're going to have lots of fun crafts, snack ideas, and even a cool little snack in there for you to start off your week. So make sure you follow along with us as we go through the lessons. For our first one, I'm Miss Allie, and there's going to be other ones to follow, but for our first one, we are going to talk about when Jesus was a boy. Our story takes place in the book of Luke, which is one of the four Gospels. Luke, he was a doctor, and so he was really hooked on the facts, and he had actually decided to write the book of Luke because he had found out that some people had written some untrue things about Jesus, and he wanted to make sure that everybody knew the facts, and what he does is give us the fullest account of Jesus' life and his ministry. In the book of Luke, he starts out by telling us the Christmas story, basically, the Jesus' parents, how they got there, where they came from, and into Jesus' miraculous birth to Mary when he was obviously the very beginning of Luke, when they were a baby. He was born to Mary, and then he also describes what happened to Jesus when he was 12 years old, which we'll go into that in a little bit. He tells us what Jesus said and did during his ministry, and Luke gives the fullest account of what happened the day that Jesus rose from the dead in Luke 24. Luke gives us strong facts, so we'll have a strong faith. So our story starts in Luke 2, 41 through 52. It takes place when Jesus and his parents would go to Jerusalem every year for the Passover. Now, if you think back to the Passover, that was when Moses had led God's people out of Egypt. And this week, it would have been about a week that they celebrated. This week was to celebrate that event in their lives. So they would have traveled to Jerusalem, which I read somewhere was about 70 miles, and they had to do that on foot. So they did that. They went to Jerusalem, over 70 miles away, and they were there for about a week to celebrate the Passover. When it became time for them to go home, Mary and Joseph thought that Jesus was traveling with them and was just kind of hanging out with some friends, but still in the same group. They traveled about 20 miles that day and came to the end of the day and started to look for their son, and they couldn't find him anywhere. They asked around, and nobody had seen him. What happened was that Jesus, when they decided to leave, Jesus lingered behind in Jerusalem without Joseph and Mary knowing. So when they started looking for him and couldn't find him, they had to travel all the way back to Jerusalem. About that same time, they started to look for him along the way and couldn't find him. They looked for about 3 days in Jerusalem, and that's no small city. So it took them 3 days to finally come to the temple of in Jerusalem, where they found Jesus sitting in the midst of the teachers, both listening to them and asking them important questions. And it says in the Bible that all who heard him were astonished at his understanding and answers. So when they saw him, they were amazed. And his mother said to him, "Son, why have you done this to us? Look, your father and I have sought for you anxiously." Mary and Joseph were so worried that they were not going to be able to find Jesus. They looked for him everywhere, and they told him this. And Jesus looks at them and says, "Why did you seek me? Did you not know that I would be about my Father's business?" But Mary and Joseph did not understand what Jesus had told them. They were still confused at why he had stayed behind in the temple. They didn't understand or didn't remember Jesus' true identity as God's son. What they didn't understand is that if they would have remembered that, they would have thought to check the temple first, because the temple, as we know, is God's house, is Jesus' Father's house. They should have known that as God's son, Jesus would be there. It says at the very end of our story that Jesus went down with them and came to Nazareth, and listened and obeyed his mother and father. And Jesus increased or grew in wisdom and stature and in favor with God and man. That in favor means that God was pleased with what Jesus had done. Jesus he didn't just disobey his parents and do it disrespectfully to stay in the temple, because Jesus didn't do that, but he stayed behind because God wanted him to be there. He wanted him to ask those questions and to talk to the teachers. Jesus knew exactly why he came, which was to inform us of all the awesomeness of God's love for us. he came in John 20:31. It tells us that these words are written that you can believe that Jesus is the Christ, the Son of God, that by believing you may have life in his name. That was John 20:31 if you want to look it up later, guys. That's our verse for this week that we're going to think back to. And the point in that verse is that Jesus knew why he came. Jesus knew that he was here to do the work God wanted him to do, which in the end we know that was for him to die on the cross so that he could save us for our sins, from our sins. He died, he rose again, and we're going to see that through this week. If you follow along over the next 3 or 4 days here, you're going to find Jesus doesn't just stay in a temple. He talks to people. He gets baptized eventually. He becomes a man, the man that God wanted him to be so that he could save us from our sins. So I'll see you guys later. Have a good week listening and following along with our VBS. And remember, if you want to, feel free to post with a hashtag VBS2020. And we can follow along with all the fun together. Bye, guys.